So good evening, everyone. My name is David Appleton, and welcome to Sports Coaching Leadership's web series featuring today Anna Wright, Anna Swisher. Today Anna is going to be talking to us about moving coaching education through the COVID-19 world. And before Anna begins, I just want to remind everyone that we have some future webinars. And they are, of course, on October 20th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to have Ann Davis talking about the evolution of tennis and the role of the coach in U.S. tennis. And then on October 27th, 2020, we're going to have at 5 p.m. the pressure to perform in professional sport with Alex Auerbach from the Toronto Raptors. And so just take a moment to think about that. And don't forget that we've also got our other speakers who have spoken in the past and presented. Past webinars, we have Michelle D. Hayden, who spoke to us back on October 6th. We have Andrew Bradshaw, Madeline Barlow, and Karen Freeman, and you can find all of them and more of our web series on www.drexel.edu/soe/academics/graduate/sport-coaching-leadership. And now, without further ado, Ann Swisher is going to be speaking to us, so I'm going to turn it over. And before I do, I want to say that in this webinar, Anna will be sharing what U.S. weightlifting is trying to achieve with coaching in sport with the COVID-19 environment. Insights into if only we knew then what we know now, and of course, trends and directions coaching education and coaching support is headed in moving past COVID-19. So Anna, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And feel free to share your screen.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you to Drexel and Cam and everyone who put this together. It's a great series and a great opportunity for people to learn. So I'm looking forward to the future presentations as well. Very cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we have responded to this. I believe the shutdown was about March 16th. I was teaching a course in Texas. I flew home on Monday, and then it sort of seemed like everything shut down. So there's sort of a lot of what's going to happen, how long is it going to be? Nobody really quite knew. And so, of course, hindsight being 2020, we can all see, well, now this is here to stay. But in March, we certainly didn't know that. So there's been a lot of learning. We put our first course together, I think, March 25th. So we went online March 25th. So we were pretty early. I live on a farm in the middle of nowhere in Tennessee. All these pictures are mine, except the one to the left, the like really nice looking jam, not mine. But my husband and I got in this fun little chat because I just, have this hobby orchard, and I spent 2 hours with my mom picking trees, and then I spent another hour like de-stemming them and sorting through them. Then I boiled them in like giant pots like you see, and then I had to take the pits out. So, if you really think about like what would I actually sell that for, it would be like $10 a jar and I wouldn't make any money. I would definitely not even be paying myself minimum wage. I also have to pay for the land. I have to plant the tree, I have to trim it, maintain it. Then I got to buy a jar and label it. So if you think about it, long story short, the input costs are really, really, really going to exceed the revenue. There's really no point in me selling the cherry jam. So I've enjoyed it myself and I eat it. So sort of the elephant in the room when you talk about online learning, and this certainly was the case back in March, is why pay more for online learning? Because the perception is that it's like a jar of Smucker's jam. It's like this cheap thing you buy off the shelf and, it should cost less. So when we first came out with the course and we said, look, it's the same price, people balked and they said, what do you mean it's the same price? It should be cheaper. It's online. And I think anyone that's ever worked in online education on the side of having to build the course, if you do it well, it's like a $20 jar of jam. You should be charging more for it. And so certainly the conversation with my husband was like, well, you should definitely pay me way more for my jam. I think now that more and more has gone online and people are focusing more on course outcomes and instructional design and adult learning because they've had to, because more people are doing it, you sort of see the whole level of online education rise up, So that's been a really interesting development. But certainly I think there's still a perception that online learning isn't as good, right? So we always have to fight that. I wanted to give just a really brief background on USA Weightlifting since every organization is a little bit different. We have about 30,000 members. We certify about 5,000 coaches a year. We don't have a big budget, but we are responsible for just under half of the annual revenue generated for our national governing body. So that's really important. We have one of the largest athlete stipends of any organization in the NGB community. So swimming, track and field, like as a percentage of what we take in, we pay the greatest sort of to our athletes directly. So we want to make sure they have money to train. We have two major courses that we generate revenue from, our two certification courses, and they're 2 days live. We have about a 1 to 15 instructor to student ratio, and they're anywhere from like an average enrollment of like 10, 15, somewhere in there, capped out at maybe 35, 40 with additional instructors. There's 3 staff members, but really Mike Catone's focus as a high performance instructor in an Olympic year goes there. So there's just myself and my colleague JP that are kind of doing day to day. We do have course instructors that go out into the field, but as I'll talk about briefly, we weren't really able to utilize them on our online transition since everything happened so quickly. So kind of what happens, we started a couple years ago with sort of PDF manuals. It's very tough to learn how to like row or do weightlifting from a static, image in a book and some words. So we transferred over to an LMS and we built out an interactive course. And so we did have a hybrid course going into it for one of our courses. So that was a big advantage. Ironically enough, our global learning outcomes were to develop coaches that were thoughtful, flexible, adaptable, which turns out 2020 has been a year that has encouraged all of us to have those skills. So a little bit interesting as to how that worked out. We really wanted to make sure that what we did was interactive. And when I talk about people thinking online education is sort of cheap and cookie cutter, maybe you're remembering your own experiences as a student where it was, here's a recorded lecture, death by PowerPoint, have fun. We tried to make it interactive. So there's different things people can click on and watch videos and have response questions and thought questions. So a lot more interactivity. And like I mentioned, we sort of ran our first course the 25th of March. So we had about, 10 days to go from in-person courses, 30 a weekend, to what are we going to do online? We recognized that maybe it would be really difficult to prepare our entire instructor pool to switch to a completely new format and a completely different layout. So what we decided to do was create an instructor fund. So we took what normal instructor pay would be and just pooled it and then distributed that to our course instructors. So I'm particularly proud of that because, we're a team. And if we can't all necessarily teach, we still need to help each other out. And we need to help, our coaches and the community be able to stay in business. We were able to, based on surveys and things like that, maintain our quality and improve, even on surveys, we got better than live. We tripled our average enrollment per course, and we were able to basically equal or better our live enrollment from the previous years, which was really, really great. And then at the same time, we created a couple other workshops to collaborate with other NGBs. So one of the key things I see coming out of COVID is finding ways to work together. So, we're providing an opportunity for triathlon coaches to learn about strength training, or we're providing some education to rowing camps, just different ways that we can kind of work together now that the cost of travel and things like that is no longer a factor. So it's been really nice to have the opportunity to collaborate a little bit more. Through June, we earned about $350,000. We still have 5 online instructors. We've just managed with our national staff and 2 other instructors. So a staff of 5, we've spent, 500 hours on Zoom. You lose track. But we are keeping the lights on and continue to do so, and we're sold out for the rest of the year. I'm teaching a course this weekend, and that's it. Sold out, 30 slots, we're done. And then we also, I'll talk about this later, created additional learning opportunities. So one of the cool things is now that people are used to learning online, it's no longer a weekend or a shorter course. We can expand the time frame for learning. So it's been really exciting to find ways to sort of build a community and get people together more often than just the courses. It helps for people to network. It helps for people to kind of stay engaged. People who are really excited about the sport but live in like rural Alaska or get up at 2 a.m. to take our courses from Hawaii, like they are pumped. And we're pumped that people are excited to keep learning. So that's been really nice for us. As far as things we've learned, that's kind of what I promised. You wear a lot of hats. in coach education. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that. But in my background, I've spent time as a university professor. I've spent time as a coach, high school, D1, D2, D3 in track and field. And then I've spent plenty of time as a student going through undergrad and graduate work. I've also spent time in private sport performance, in international coach education. So in each of those roles, right, there's things that you draw upon to think, okay, how am I going to design this course? So when you think about what's going to happen when we go online, the first thing I did was pull up a syllabus. I pulled up a syllabus from one of my previous courses that I taught and said, all right, we're going to need to make a syllabus, because the things that you usually say, you're not going to have a chance to say. So, we put all the details, all the questions that people would have, and just did like we would normally do in an online course, because I've taught online, in a traditional academic setting. We also added virtual office hours, which I really like. So if people are confused or they have questions or they want to look at the material and come back to us, they feel like they can come to us for support, which is always what we want. So we offered people virtual office hours that you can see there, and encourage people to reach out. We tried to create some assignments, just like you would get in an undergrad, syllabus. Here's your reading, here's your homework, here's how you submit it, and here's what the day looks like for the next day. So we tried to craft some thoughtful assignments. I'll talk about those in a little bit. And then also make sure that we had interactive components. So no death by PowerPoint. The interactivity was super important. So whether that was people submitting video of themselves, on off days, or videos of their athletes, or having people work collaboratively to design training or work through problems, we needed to make sure that there were interactive course components. Otherwise, online learning isn't really going to result in a whole lot of learning. What we're missing when we do online. Oh, go ahead.
So I have a question, and are you meeting with the class asynchronous or synchronized?
Synchronous. Yeah, it's
Great.
synchronous learning. But what we set up was opportunities for them to do some learning on their own and then come to us synchronously. So for example, a 2-day course became a 3-day course. And so we had some work that they had to do before the course. We discussed the work at the beginning of the synchronous course. We went through some stuff as a group. Then they had some assignments to do. They had some more work to do after that. And then we met back up again. So that format. Yeah, that's a good question.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we thought that was really, really important. We did need to make sure that we told people, like, there will be time outside of class. If you sign up for a weekend course, it's the weekend and then it's over. This is a situation where we were asking for probably 10 hours outside of class time. We needed to be really clear about that in terms of managing people's expectations. Because if you go from this expectation that it's going to be this, one weekend in and out, people have lives, they're quite busy, they've got kids. So we needed to be really clear on that. And we found that giving people the option to change dates, if that was not a good time for them, was useful for some people. So they could be in the right, space and framework to do that. And things are fluid. Gyms are opening, closing, things get crazy. There's a hands-on component to our course. You can't really learn how to row or bike or swim or lift without hands-on. So the micro coaching and things like that are super important. We didn't really have an opportunity to do that. So we needed to do the virtual office hours. We needed to find ways for people to follow up with us. And we offered a free level 1 live course to anyone who took it online. So whenever they go back live, just find one, because we recognize that that's a key piece that we had to have in there, sort of like a lab, if you will. Putting my coaching hat on, you need to provide them information that's relevant to them at that moment. So if they can't use it, if it's over their heads, if it's not relevant, people aren't going to pay attention, and it's even worse on Zoom. You're taking people's time, you're taking quite a bit of it, more so than previously, and you're certainly asking them to invest in their career. So we wanted to, make sure that we made good use of it. And then, of course, when people are like, this was great, this was so helpful, I live in Hawaii, and there's no way I could get this, or I'm in Tokyo. Where do I go from here? We could tell them read this book or come to a meet or find a mentor, but, we then found that we could just give them an opportunity to continue to learn. So we did. So we created a series of lunch chats, which was really, really fun. And every 2 weeks, we get together with folks and continue onwards. Thinking back to what it's like to be a student in a death by PowerPoint situation, we wanted to make sure that coaches were actively involved. So they submit video, their input is being received. If you have an adult learner, they need to be able to showcase their expertise because they do bring expertise. It isn't, you know, some genius instructor and nobody else has anything to share. You know, and making sure that people understood that it was synchronous and there wasn't anything sort of canned. It was created just for them. Maximizing interactivity, I think, is critical. Making sure that they have an opportunity to both feel like they can contribute, but also to have their coaching sort of eye validated. So when people watch something and you say, hey, what did you see, coaches? And they saw the same thing someone else did, they sort of can start to feel like, oh, okay, all right, I do know what I'm doing, you know? So there's a lot of validation in having people share their thoughts. And on the flip side, there's some people that are like, I didn't see that at all. I really thought I could pick out what was going on. Man, I need to work harder at this. And so that, I think, was productive as well. If it wasn't fun, there's no point in doing it, you know? So we made sure to have a good time with folks and, you know, have some lighter moments and funny videos or this, that, or the other. So the pacing and the flow, I think, are super important. We had a 2-hour lunch break. That's very helpful. Things that we learned from an organizational standpoint is that we weren't really prepared. We had a very large instructor pool and we weren't really prepared to navigate how to get facilitators, how to select them, how to train them, how to, you know, manage their time. They had businesses, they had things going on, you know, they're not full-time employees. So that was something that we realized we needed to invest in more, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Like I said, hands-on, free level 1 had to. And then kind of a cool thing that happened, and I've heard this said from other organizations, is that everyone has to work together. Like, people are losing jobs, people are, you know, going into bankruptcy, people are having, you know, extreme life stress. And people that didn't necessarily spend that much time working together or had sort of different projects, like, we all had to come together, and this was the focus. So, you know, we pulled crazy hours and did crazy things, but, you know, we worked together, and I think we're better for it. And I think that was really, really nice to see. As a coach developer, you know, thinking with a coach developer hat on, we really had to consider that it wasn't so much content, it was facilitation skills and how we provided, you know, feedback and instruction. So a lot of the things that we built into our courses or emphasized once we went in online was reflection and programming, which I'll show you guys some examples of. I talked about managing expectations and spacing out days. I don't know what the right spacing is, but certainly going back to back on Zoom is tough. So that's something that's a real challenge, I think, for anyone that's teaching in that space. If you were like a semester-long student, yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that's cool, or Tuesday, Thursday, and you're out. But if you've got weekends and you've got people that are giving up 2 consecutive weekends, that's a pretty big investment. And that's where we started. So spacing out the days so it's not too much time on Zoom, but there's not so much space in between that people can still manage it. So that was something we were doing. We had a lot of people that really appreciated not having to interact with so many people and being in their own physical space. So we did have a lot of introverts say, like, look, I know I'm a coach and I need to get out with people, but it was really, really nice to be in this sort of a low stress situation for them. We always had 2 instructors. So from a practical standpoint, you always have to have 2 people running the show, because there's going to be a tech issue. There's going to be some sort of a problem with internet. Someone's not going to be able to connect. You're going to get a panicked email. You have to have that so that it makes your workload higher in terms of your instructors, but I thought critical. People really wanted to learn more. They wanted, like, what's next after this? So after our level 2 course, which is our highest level, they're like, well, where do I go from here? So we started a mentorship program run through our national office. And then we also started lunch chats, and then a Facebook, like a community group through that as well. So here's an example of maybe a module or some things that people would be expected to do. And I think it's sort of a format that's worked really nicely. So we're talking about communication as a skill that we want coaches to improve. And of course, in a hands-on live setting, it's very easy to do. Okay, coaches, you're going to set some communication goals that you guys are going to work through in this next hands-on session, where you're going to teach each other, go through this progression. I want you to focus on these communication skills, and we'll talk about it after the session. Okay, online, when we're not having the opportunity to interact and we can't be sure that everyone has someone to coach, you know, the micro coaching skills are kind of lost. So you know what we can do? We can have some short videos, how to hold attention, how to have difficult conversations, how to reframe failure after a competition, And so we have sort of key topics that we think are important for our coaches to be able to know how to do. And they watch short, like 4 or 5 minute videos. And after each video, there's some key points. You can see here, there's a little bit of interactivity. Click on that. Those are sort of the key points of the video. And then there's a series of reflection questions. So there's, 3 to 5 reflection questions, like how are you going to apply this? So think of a time an athlete, bombed out of a competition. How are you going to, how did you manage it? How would you change how you'd manage it? Things like that. So they had those reflection questions. Then we have an opportunity to watch videos as a group during the synchronous online course and say, okay, guys, here's a lifter. What did you notice? Okay, what would you say to the lifter? How would you deal with it? Go ahead and unmute and tell us what you would say directly to this lifter. So they have a chance to kind of practice it. Then we give them an opportunity after that day, after that synchronous day of learning, to reflect. What was new? What was difficult? What are you still working on, right? And so they can sort of think through, like, man, I really thought I could do that. Well, that was harder than I expected, or, this aspect was difficult. We then take that as instructors, we take their daily reflection and we email them back between days. So David, if you were to send in like, oh, this is really challenging, I'm still trying to think through this, we might respond and say, hey, thanks for taking the time to do that. I really appreciate it. Some suggestions, if there's, this issue you still want to work through, is maybe take a look at this, or, give this exercise a try. Maybe look at this book. And, looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. So making sure that they got some personalized feedback. Then we encourage them to practice. So, hey, between now and the time we meet again, go ahead and give this a try if you can. And then we give them an opportunity twice a month to take part in our lunch chats. So we can do a video review. So we give them the opportunity to share video with us. And then as a group, we go through it. So we did find sort of ways to work around it. Now, the key point is it takes a lot of our time. It takes a lot more time, right? This is like $20 cherry jam. This is not, here's your PowerPoint and move on. So, building it out and doing it, if you have to scale this, you're going to need to find ways to scale it with a larger instructor pool. So there's a lot of challenges there. Like I talked about, the reflection, people have it. It's part of the pre-course. Every module they view has reflection questions built in, of course, after every day, and then at the end of the course. And so that's been really nice. Here's just some examples of those reflections. Some people, put in a line or two, and some people really put a lot of thought and effort into it. Micah mentioned before, there's some coaches that are like, yeah, I thought I knew quite a bit, but I really do have a lot more to learn. And not in a negative way, just, there's more to learn. Some people that recognize, like, gosh, writing an athlete's training plan is a lot of work. If I have to put together training as an athlete, I never really realized how much work went into that. So there are a lot of people that said, gosh, I spent 4 hours and I didn't even get to it. I can't believe it took me 8 hours. This is incredible. And they enjoyed it. It wasn't like a complaint. It was an acknowledgement of the amount of effort that goes into doing those things. So then once people had created those, we gave them an opportunity to share. So when we talk about adult learners sharing their expertise, here's an opportunity for them to share their expertise. This is how I approach this problem. This is how I approach this lifter or this, video. And then they have a chance to share, which I think is great. When we ask them to reflect, on program design, look, it's a thing where theory to practice, right? Every coach has to be able to actually apply theory into something they could hand a real life human. And sometimes in formal coach education, that gets lost, and that becomes the role of like a mentorship program or an internship, or your first job or a graduate assistant. And so it was really nice for us to have the chance to get people to start to create programs, right? That top level of Bloom's taxonomy. You're going to create a program, and then you're going to share it with other coaches. You're going to see how other people approached it. And I think that sharing of knowledge among the coaches has been really well received, right? So that was really nice for us to see. What's going to change? So what do we go, what do we do now? A lot of times, in March, we were thinking like, let's just cram a ton of courses in here. We've run through, I think, maybe close to 1,400 coaches at this point online. We're going to keep it. And I think many people that I've talked to are going to keep it. So for various reasons, you can do global things. So we've done courses in Germany. I've taught at 2 a.m. For time differences. We've done courses with a lot of coaches in Southeast Asia. So we've expanded to a lot of different markets that maybe don't have quality education. there's a woman from Slovakia that's like, there's no way I'd ever get this type of quality. So just really grateful to be able to take her education. And so that's been really nice. It's not necessarily our mission to grow weightlifting globally, but it's been really fun to get coaches from 10 different countries, you know, all talking about the same issues. I think it makes for a more robust course. If we do have a live cancellation, there's always an online option, which I think is really, really nice. And then I think what we've learned is we need instructors that are not just coaches, that are quality facilitators, that have an understanding of adult learning and have an understanding of how this should work online. And some of them already have it. Some of them have a great skill set. They're teachers by trade. You know, they have a master's degree in education. But a lot of them aren't. They're coaches that maybe don't have that formal education. So we have set up opportunities for deeper instructor training starting in November, so we can make sure that we have adult learning and reflection and some of those skills better developed in our instructor pool, which I think will make for better coaches and better preparation for an expansion for online education. And that will help us with scaling as well. I mentioned the lunch chats, and then we'll create sort of CEU courses, basically smaller modules for continued learning. We have a speaker series, kind of like, you know, this webinar type series here, where we can have sort of different topics that we can dive in on. I think the anatomy, oh, go ahead.
So can you talk a little bit, and maybe if you want to circle back to this at the end, that's fine, but I just loved hearing about just the part about quality facilitators. And can you give us some specific examples about what a person like that, or what a group who helps to, because you know, as you said, like, yeah, you're right, you can't expect them all the time to be these dynamic, amazing in-person coaches, but at the same time, you're trying to now, you know, fit them from a round peg into a square hole of online learning. What does that look like for quality facilitation? I'm curious.
You know, that's a great question. And, you know, I don't mean to disparage our coaches. They're phenomenal coaches and they're great instructors live.
Yes.
It's just a totally different ballgame online. And I
Correct.
think
Yeah.
there's a deeper appreciation when your background is in teaching that you go, oh gosh, you know, we got to change it. So we normally have 15 hours live. Now it's 9 and it's split up over 3 days and it's different, you know. So a good example of looking at what does facilitation look like, I think probably the most glaring is how to deal with sort of the flow of the course and get conversations going virtually. So if you're used to, you're like, oh, raise your hand or whatever. Mm-hmm. Instead of sort of a guided discovery, instead of like letting people kind of have a chat about it, there's a real temptation to just blurt out and say, here's what it is. And we know that learning outcomes are much better when there's a little bit of a lead and letting people kind of pull it out from information. Right. What do you guys think about this? You know, how would you approach this? And there's sort of this, well, I've been a coach for 20 years and this is how, you know, I deal with it. I think when you have that longer period of just sitting online, mm-hmm. you need to find ways to facilitate discussion that's maybe a little bit more difficult. So particularly in watching videos, a coach might just like walk through what they see instead of saying, okay, let me ask 5 coaches, what does this look like to you? And then pull out. So I think the big focus is going from push to pull. You're not pushing information. You're not transmitting knowledge. You're not just giving them everything you know. You're trying to pull out of them what they know and get them to be really thoughtful about how they would deal with it and how that is different among the group. Okay, well, that's interesting. Why would you do that? So sort of the art of those follow-up questions, facilitation, and there's a real temptation just to say, like, look, I've been doing this forever. Here's how you do it. I don't think people get as much out of it in that way. And the focus is on hands-on learning. It's a little bit different online when you don't have that. And so if the highlight is hands-on and now it's not there, you know, what do you do? And also in the group work, right? So making sure people are doing group work and that you're giving them clear instructions. So, you know, maybe you can imagine an example where someone's like, okay, I'm going to break you guys up into groups and you do this. And the first 5 minutes is like, okay, so what are we supposed to be doing? So designing those sort of opportunities with enough clarity that people can kind of dive in, and then the pacing and the timing. So the pacing and timing of how long will it take? How long should they be in breakout rooms? How long should you go before you take a break? I think a lot of the flow needs to be thought through just based on how long people can focus on some things. But yeah, definitely good questions. And thinking about scaling and thinking about how can you sort of spread this out if you're an organization that's got, thousands and thousands of people that you have to deal with, like hockey or tennis, for example. Maybe there's parts of the course that you can pre-record, in a thoughtful way. I don't mean to say that asynchronous is not helpful, but maybe there's parts that can be pre-recorded, and then there's, an opportunity in synchronous learning to revisit those or ask some thoughtful questions about them. But if you have some pre-recorded, if you have some interactive modules, if you have synchronous learning and then, follow up and reflection, I think that can work really well. You have to be careful about how much time you're demanding of your learner. And I think particularly with adult learners that have jobs, kids, lives, you have to be really upfront about how much you're going to ask of them, because we did get some pushback from people saying like, look, I did not bargain for this. This is so much work. Yeah, that's the case. It's going to be more work, because when you have an online course, you have more time, which is a blessing and a curse if you were just doing it to get the piece of paper, So I think that's been nice, but figuring out sort of the optimal blend of those pieces and how you can do it. I think people don't necessarily expect online learning to be fabulous because so many people are changing quickly. So we did get a lot of really kind feedback from educators who maybe had done it themselves and were like, wow, I'm impressed that this actually worked out better than I thought. So we certainly have a lot we can improve on, but it was nice to get some encouraging feedback on our flow. Cam and I were having a conversation with Wade Gilbert in another context a couple weeks ago, and he said something that I thought was really insightful, which is that a lot of times people develop courses thinking like, let me just shove everything in there, like everything a coach could possibly ever need to know, like, let me just drop it in there. Like, maybe they might need this, maybe they might need that. And you end up with basically what amounts to like a repository, like a curated repository of stuff. And it can be, just this huge, huge, huge repository of like, it might be there, and that's maybe not as helpful to a learner. It's very tempting because online you have the ability to just dump everything in there. But you need to think a little bit more thoughtfully about how much you're providing. Are you overwhelming them? And is it relevant? And is it exactly what they need? So who is your learner? What skills are they looking to develop, right? And is your course matching those? So thinking more about just in time. So really, how do you know? Like, do you ever ask coaches, like, what are you taking this course for? What are the 3 things you're hoping to learn from this course? What do you struggle with the most? So through reflections and through just asking, you can start to get some consensus on what people are coming to you for and really targeting that. So having that feedback beyond just like survey data, for example, I think can help you design a course that will keep people more actively engaged, because it's like, right, I need that. That's what I need. And then I think taking the extra time to personalize and making it clear that you are acknowledging that people are coming to you from different backgrounds, working in different industries, and need different skill sets coming out of it. So you may have, in my world, a functional fitness coach, you may have a high school sport coach, you may have a collegiate strength and conditioning coach, and you may have a weightlifting club coach. You may have someone working with youth, with masters. And so all those people are going to have different things they need to get out of that course. If you have the ability to acknowledge where all those sectors are coming from, say, hey, this is for you. This is what, highlighting, hey, for you working with youth, you need to really pay attention to this. Or if we're working with a master's athlete, we need to do that. And all of that takes a tremendous input and willingness of the instructor to take the time to do that. And I'm not going to sit here and say, like, look, we do this really well, everyone should do this. If I've got 40,000 coaches, there's just no way. But giving some real thought into how much you're personalizing it, how much you can engage with people individually, or even create clusters of special interests. Because I think that goes a long way into getting people to put the work in on their ends and engage on their ends. And I think when it comes to instructors, you need to make sure you have people that have what I'm going to say is a pride of ownership. That they're willing to put in the work that it would take to make a really nice cherry jam. And I think that's sort of the takeaway for us. We're sold out for the rest of the year. We're teaching so many courses. We've got some live courses that are back on. We're creating new courses. We're collaborating with other NGBs. And we're finding sort of creative new ways to keep the education pathway going with us and with other sports. So I suspect that now that this looks like it will probably go through next spring, we're going to be taking a lot from our reflections and our surveys and seeing what we can do better. But it's been a really interesting ride for the last however many months time warp it's been. And we're certainly appreciative that people are willing to take a chance on an online course, even if they believe like, nah, it's probably not going to be that good. So we're glad to have exceeded expectations at this point. But if there's folks that have any questions or comments or any particular questions, I'm not sure what context other people are working in.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, Anna, for that really, I think, eye-opening overview of what you are doing. And it sounds like you're doing some really amazing stuff. At this point, I'd like to open it up to questions if any of the group have questions. I know I have a question, but I'll let the other people who are online, if they want to ask Anna a question, feel free. You can either put it in the chat, you don't have to speak, or I'm happy to read it, or you can ask it. You can turn on your mics.
Who doesn't love a good chat window?
Who doesn't love a good chat window? That is true.
Always go dual screens.
So one question, go ahead. Cheryl, go ahead.
I was just going to say, kudos to you for doing what you've done. I know I've been teaching online for almost 20 years now at Ball State University in the master's program in coaching education. So I know what it takes to create online courses, and the pandemic definitely forced people to do it maybe when they didn't want to. So kudos to you for like what you have done. My question to you is the synchronous piece. I feel like with coaches, that's like the hardest thing to figure out. Everyone's schedules, everyone, you know, coming together at a specific time to be live and in person. Like, how did you make that happen?
Well, I think we had a precedent of our courses when they were live were always on weekends. So acknowledging that people have day jobs, you know, there's an understanding that people would take one weekend and give it to us to learn. So we tried to keep it to the weekend schedule, just that was going to be the best way. But we recognized that taking 2 weekends, which, you know, I don't know if there's a max limit of how many hours you can spend on Zoom a day, but it's certainly not 8 hours. So we gave people like an ample lunch break and tried to spread it out. So we initially did Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, and spread it, or Saturday, Sunday, Sunday, I think. We switched, you know, trying to mess with that to spread it out. And then we said, you know what, 2 weekends is a lot. It's a commitment. So we said, what if we just did one evening and we did Saturday, Sunday, Thursday? It gave people a couple of days to kind of do their case programming homework, a couple days break, a couple days to practice things, but still wasn't this overwhelming, daunting, how can I plan? It's tough for people to plan. So we settled on Saturday, Sunday, kind of all day with a big break, and then a Thursday evening from 5 to 8 p.m. And that's worked out pretty well for us. Our shorter course, that's 9 hours, we broke up to just 3 hours a day. And so we could run that midweek, and we tested it. We said, let's do like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Let's do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Let's do a Saturday, Sunday, AM, PM, AM, and let's see. And we didn't see any difference. You know, we had so many international folks, and we sold them all out. So we didn't see any reason to switch. But Cheryl, I would love to hear your insights on how to do a better job of instructional design for online learning. I learned on the fly in terms of online instructional design. I don't have a degree in it, but I am just enough to be dangerous on instructional design. But if someone were trying to do a better job of instructional design with online learning, what should they do?
Are you really asking me that question I should answer now?
Yes, I'm really asking you that. Asking for a friend, obviously.
Well, I missed the beginning of your session because I was actually on a Zoom call before this. So I'm not sure exactly what you said at the beginning, but from when I joined in, to me, you know, I have been consulted on many people trying to pandemic themselves into online learning. And I feel like you really have thought it through as far as like your individualization, like realizing your audience. You have to realize, you know, who you're speaking to. You can't just brain dump everything into a course and just think people are going to learn something. So, I mean, we could offline, if you want to talk more about this, I'd be happy to, but I feel like from what I saw of what you did, like, I really do think you know, thought it through versus some people are just like, oh yeah, I'll just take my course and throw it online, because it's not as easy of a transition as that. I mean, it would be nice if it was, but it really, there is like this different modality of teaching that you have to hone into in order to make sure the people who are learning from you are actually learning what you want them to.
I think that's great. Thanks, Cheryl. I have a question, and that's, it's deviating a little bit from that, unless we want to continue on this path. Can I ask a question? What about making the case, so when COVID does end, if you, as you said, maybe we would see this back to normalcy maybe next spring, not this spring, but next spring. Do you see a case for going back to the way things were? I know you said that online learning is here to stay, that that's what you're going to be doing and moving forward, but it's got to, in my opinion, just on what I've seen and my background in higher ed, and really, you know, the School of Education at Drexel was one of the people who got into on the ground floor of online learning. And we kind of went into it always knowing that online learning is here to stay, but at the same time, it's not, we never could see it being the sole way that somehow society, even with this, would change over to a fully virtual system, especially for something like coaching, where the devil's in the details of being in the room, and it's not just about what you see and what you hear through a microphone, but it's everything, right? Mm-hmm. So, Anna, do you see this coming back in a way where it's like a hybrid? What are you thinking when a return to normalcy does occur? Is this all going away to an extent, or is it reducing in some way? That's my question.
That's a great question. And a lot of people have that very same question, like, what's going to happen from here? I've always believed in hybrid learning, always. Every program I've ever set up, private sector education, it's always been hybrid learning. I think you expand the window for learning. I think if you have some components that are online and asynchronous, and then you have some components that are in person, you get a better learning outcome. That's the point. I mean, you're affecting change. If you don't affect change in a coach, if you don't, you know, give them something that they do differently, and you can follow up at 6 months and 12 months and say, you know, what are you still looking at? You can look online. Did they log in? You know, are they still using this? Are they still doing it? I mean, I think the idea is if you're going to affect them for longer than a weekend, that should always be your goal. And we know that you can't just like shove a bunch of information in someone and expect it to go well. You need to give them opportunities to practice. You know, so to your point, you know, what do you do to a coach to teach them when they're not actually coaching? There's some creative ways. They can have them do a session. So I know some other sports, I think tennis has had people do like a coaching and film themselves coaching and then tag their coaching behaviors in a tagging software. That's and then have them review it. Again, tough to scale, tough to do. But I think the ultimate answer is for courses that are more advanced, that aren't necessarily as focused on hands-on, those can live on largely online. For introductory courses where you're dealing with newer coaches where like the hands-on micro coaching like has to happen, I think you need to leave those live, but I think you can augment them with well done, you know, good quality instructional design of online modules that now will carry more weight than they did before COVID. If you say, look, you're going to get this material a month before and we expect you to do this, that, and the other, and you're going to have that syllabus and you're going to have the virtual office hours and you're going to set those expectations, I think you'll get better outcomes and you'll change more behavior. And to Cheryl's point, you know, for every 10 minutes in person, whether it's online or live, it's an hour of prep time. You know, so you have to put the work in on the instructional design, live or online. And if you don't do that and you're just like, hey, let's throw some weight around or let's just read through this PowerPoint, you're not going to get what you want. So if you don't work from like a instructional design perspective, what are your learning outcomes, right? What do you want people to walk away with? What are their skills and abilities that you really want them to be able to do? And then design activities and the course to make sure that it drives towards that. You're never going to get what you want. So I think what COVID has brought out is people's awareness that there actually has to be a structure for a course that's perhaps more complex than they had to. They weren't forced to make it that way in person. I don't want to say you could get away with more, but maybe you could prep a little bit less and still have like a good experience, you know, like bring the students cupcakes and get a good eval and you're done with the thing, you know? So I think there's an acknowledgement of the field of instructional design.
That's great. Is there any other question? Josh?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I used to work for USA Rugby. I worked in coach education and coach development. Now coaching at Stanford. So just to give a bit of background there, but I think it's fascinating as you talked about like wanting to do more. I think one of the interesting parts about going online and going virtual in this environment is that people are getting more adept at using these virtual tools, Zoom, reviewing videos and those sorts of things. I just wonder, do you see, has something brand new in that mentorship space post level 2? Because I think that's where the chosen growth happens as opposed to the formal growth, right? They've kind of finished their formal education piece. Has this springboarded you towards new programs that you might look to codify to create structure for learners post that level 2, using these tools to shrink the size of the country? Because I think that's a huge problem for the US as opposed to Europe, where a 2-hour drive might get you to the best weightlifting coach that's around that area.
Yeah, Josh, that's a great question. And I think, yes, we initially realized like after level 2, people were like, but what's next? And we're like, well, we're not going to see you at a meet for a while, you know, like we can't grab a coffee at a meet. So for, you know, our top of the pyramid, like they really were quite self-motivated. And a lot of them were in situations where they didn't necessarily have those opportunities. And we had quite a bit of expertise in Mike Catone and JP Nicoletta, my 2 colleagues that have been in the sport for 40 years. You know, Mike was coaching before I was born. So it seems a waste, you know, to not allow them to share. And of course, we're all super excited to talk shop, you know, our coaches. So what we did is those lunch chats sort of grew out of the level 2, and we got people together, submit a video, let's talk about this. We're doing a mock meet. It's every other Wednesday. So how do you do competition tactics? Let's go through it as a group. And then we actually started thinking, I just had a conversation with my colleague this morning, actually, about creating a modular system that effectively acts as a series of electives. So, you know, we'd split out like transformational leadership, like emotional intelligence, or, you know, mental skills in high-level competitions, or peaking for a national level competition. So we can sort of do additional prep work for our top coaches. And we can be the people that they go to, as opposed to like a book or a seminar or whatever. Like we should be the trusted resource. Like USA Rugby should be where people go for rugby information, not like some random rugby coach, you know? So we want to provide that. And we have evidence that now these people are really keen to learn from us, and we'll provide sort of additional opportunities. So yeah, we have in the works probably a series of at least 8 that we were just spitballing initially. And then we try them out in those lunch chats. Like, okay, what do you guys want to learn more about? You guys tell us. Coaching in a competition. Okay, great. Let's do a mock meet. Let's throw up the scoreboard. Well, I'd like to go through the video review a little bit more. Okay, great. Hey, we didn't really spend as much time going over how you would do the last 4 weeks leading into a competition. Can we talk more about how you program for that? Sure. You know, and so that gives us a sense of like what people need, like that just in time. What do they need? And it gives us, you know, in 2 weeks, we can build it and give it to them. And then we can flesh those out and make those larger modules. And we record them and make them available to everyone after that top level. And I suspect I'm a big advocate for sort of a core curriculum and electives, right? Academic background, don't need to reinvent the wheel. Core courses, electives. Give people electives to pick from, do them really well, and then you will reap the benefits in quality coaching.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I know
I'd love to collaborate too.
Yeah,
like with rugby.
Sure. I mean, I'm less involved now than I used to be. I do some of the coaching courses when they're in person, but I know that when we were certifying sort of 5,000 to 6,000 coaches a year, it was really hard to take a step back and figure out some of this stuff. And just that pathway from a good coach to an elite coach, I think is so difficult to transition. And I do think that maybe some of the learnings that are coming out of COVID-19, you're trapped in your own space so much, could actually help shrink the size of the country. And hearing those thoughts is pretty exciting.
Yeah, and we went live to U.S. Rowing's national convention and did like a little workshop. We did a course for a military base in Germany. We did a course for professional NBA and NFL strength coaches. There's different opportunities that maybe you wouldn't have been presented before this. And so I think maybe that a lot of symposiums or annual conferences or things like that where maybe people couldn't make, they're all going virtual. And there's an understanding that we can do more than we could before when we were limited by geography or limited by instructor pool. And we can increase the consistency and the quality of information being delivered. And with thoughtful instructional design, have it be like a positive experience for adult learners, so long as we put in, I think, the interactivity and the time in personalizing it. But I am super excited. I mean, I have a lot to learn in terms of instructional design. I'm sure there's a lot more we could do, but even just the thought of basically creating those electives and giving coaches a bigger pathway, so exciting. Go ahead, Cheryl, you can unmute. Oh no, that's a clap. Sorry, I'm used to the hand raise. No, I don't know. So many emojis, so little time.
So little time.
I was clapping for you because I agree with what you said. I mean, I feel like you do need to package this and share, because the thought pattern that you have behind this course development, to me, needs to be shared, because it's true. Like, instructional design needs to be thought about. The elective piece that you were talking about, I think, is so important, because you really want people to be able to hone in on whatever it is that they desire to learn, as opposed to, oh, do I have to sit through this course? I don't really care about this, but like really be able to pick and choose, to me, is like absolutely a direction that everyone should go in when they're doing this course development. So I was just giving you a clap.
Yeah. And you know what, Cheryl, it cracks me up, because not a lot of people in the NGB coach development world come from education. And that was weird for me, because I was like, what do you mean? I mean, my degree is in sport physiology and performance, but I've taught at, undergrad, grad at a couple universities, and I have some training in instructional design, right? But it's always struck me as really weird that people didn't get the concept of core and electives. Like, you're building a curriculum. Like, I don't care if it's coach education or a graduate program, but you're building a curriculum. There is an education pathway. So if you think of it just as like what academia has done, it's like you pick your own electives after the course. So we can all agree that to be a quality coach, coaching philosophy and ethics and communication, diversity and inclusion, and making sure that you have these sort of like core foundations. But past that, you need to meet people what they're actually going to use. If you're a CrossFit coach, you don't want to hear about, youth weightlifting development, like that doesn't help you. But if you think that's really important, you should make people sit through it, but being thoughtful about the elective system, I thought, like, pretty much every university does that. Why should we be different? But to get that actually built out, where you can have some sport agnostic modules that you can share between, has been more challenging than I expected. But it's definitely in the works, so that we can get good quality information without having redundancy, making sure we can pool resources, doing things a quality way. So there's certainly differences in budgets. We're not a very large NGP, and differences in staffing and skill sets and backgrounds. So I think if we work together, we can do some really cool things. But certainly we're trying to lead the charge in setting up a system that's going to be effective and trying to get people to join with us.
That was fantastic. So thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. At this point, I'm going to end Q&A, and I just want to, if I could, take over one last time. I just want to share a couple of last thoughts on the presentation. Unless, Anna, do you have anything else you want to add before we close?
No, just thank you for having me on this. And it's always nice to kind of talk shop and think through, like, what can we do better?
Yeah. And thank you very much for that really, I think, in-depth look at, the post-COVID landscape with coaching. And we appreciate your time. We've had questions. I just wanted to also remind everyone who attended that we do have an evaluation rating system that should be coming to your email shortly. Feel free to fill that out. And then the final thing is that if you have any questions for us for things we're doing here in Sport Coaching Leadership, feel free to reach out to myself, David Appleton, Program Manager for Sport Coaching Leadership MS program. and also Cam Slagos, who's the Managing Director for Sports Coaching Leadership. At this time, I want to say thank you very much to our speaker, Anna Wright. Is it Anna Wright or Anna Simmons? I mean, Anna Swisher.
You know what? My maiden name is Swisher, and I married Trey Wright, but no one ever wants to be known as Professor Wright. So
that's true, Professor Wright. I understand. Thank you very much to Cheryl and Josh for participating. We appreciate that, and we look forward again to seeing you again at our future webinars. And at this time, I say thank you very much and have a good evening. Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, David.